Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me in this fourth in my series on Gilded Age women of Southampton. Today's subject is Rose DeRose, a fascinating woman who turned out to be something of a society misfit. Nothing in Rose DeRose's privileged background could have suggested that one future day she would be delivering eggs from her farm in Southampton, and that she would be known as the Egg Lady. Certainly her parents could not have anticipated that their only child, whom they were preparing for a life in high society, would grow up to raise chickens and pigs on their magnificent 12-acre Southampton estate, and to reinvent herself as a farmer. Rose's father, Edmund, like many another Gilded Age grandee, made his fortune in coal. Her mother is a descendant of General Joseph Bradley Warnham, who served under George Washington in the American Revolution. The handsome main house on the estate, thought to be a Stanford White design, was one of the earliest summer cottages in Southampton and had belonged to Edward Spencer Mead, a partner in the publishing house Dodd Mead. What is certain is that the house, which is at the corner of Hill Street and Halsey Neck Lane, is a beautiful survivor among the early summer cottages and has many of the architectural features associated with White. Early photographs testify to its graceful interior with its fruitwood paneled living room, where in 1891, Edward Mead hosted an historic gathering. Having discovered the new game of golf when vacationing in the south of France, Mead, on his return, invited some of his summer colony friends, Dr. T. Gayoff, Thomas J. Hampton Robb, George R. Seflin, Charles Barney, Samuel Parrish, and Charles Atterbury, to join him in organizing what was to become the Shinnecock Hills Golf Club. Once they become part of the Southampton cottager colony, the DeRose family, preceded by a battery of servants, arrives every summer in their private railroad car to spend the season in Southampton. As a child, Rose DeRose is probably indifferent to the splendors of the family residence. It's when she's roaming its vast and glorious grounds, accompanied by her dogs, cats, and other animals, that she's happiest. A sickly child, she was reportedly epileptic. She revels in the undemanding companionship of her pets and the calm beauty of the park-like surroundings. Much as she loves the freedom to roam, Rose is far from a wild child. She seems to have been an eager student and was patient in perfecting a number of skills. She learns the art of wood carving from a Scandinavian craftsman and becomes quite good at it. This is one of hers. She masters several languages, develops proficiency as a pianist, and is said to have a lovely singing voice. There are, in fact, few indications during her childhood and adolescence of her later rebellion against conventional behavior. As long as her parents hold sway over her conduct, she submits to the traditional training females could expect who were born into wealthy, high-ranking families. When the time comes for Rose to move beyond private instruction, she's sent to Miss Spence's School for Girls in New York. The school was founded in 1892 by education visionary Clara Spence, who believed passionately in the importance of higher education for women. Beyond academics, Miss Spence puts much emphasis on her students' future roles as active members of their communities and includes in her mission the cultivation of, quote, an earnest desire to help others. A 1916 report on Rose's progress at the Spence School, which survives in the archives of the Southampton History Museum, shows her ranked among the best in her class. For some reason, she does not complete her studies at Spence. In August 1918, the Southampton Press reports that Miss Rose DeRose has resumed her studies at Miss Hall's school in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. In her teen years, Rose is becoming an astonishing beauty, one who is expected to dazzle at the debutante balls. Not yet ready to challenge expectations, she remains a promising socialite, at least in her mother's eyes. It's during this period of Rose's early adulthood that she and her mother begin traveling the world together, and their comings and goings are faithfully chronicled in the Southampton Press. Items in the cottager columns invariably begin, Mrs. Edward DeRose and her daughter, Miss Rose DeRose, and then goes on to say where they are traveling. In 1917, mother and daughter sail on the Lapland to spend the summer in Europe. They take the same ship to Europe again in 1920, then return home on the Olympic and remain in Southampton until after Thanksgiving. In 1922, they're traveling together again. After visiting Hot Springs, they return to Southampton and co-host a garden tea with Hawaiian music at Westover. A 1924 motor trip to Maine leaves both mother and daughter wanting more. And in May of 1925, the press reports, quote, Mrs. Edward DeRose and her daughter, Miss Rose DeRose, who have been motoring in Italy, are now in Rome. They will return next month and come to Southampton, close quotes. Not long afterward, in a list of new car owners published in the press, Miss Rose DeRose's purchase of a Cadillac touring car is duly noted. Holland is among Rose's favorite destinations in Europe, and when her travels broaden, she adds Russia and other more exotic destinations to the list. Anyone who remembers her only as the egg lady who favored baggy house dresses and raised chickens and pigs might be astonished to learn of her world travels, her fluency in several languages, and her social ease as a guest who was welcomed in some of the most sophisticated and exotic environments. At home, there's hope that at one point that her singing voice might lead to a career as an opera singer. She does study voice for a while, but perhaps hampered by illness, she gives up any thoughts of becoming an opera star. Inevitably, Rose finds other traveling companions to replace her mother. She appears to have made a very good friend in Alice Nealon Monroe, a civic-minded contemporary whose public notices tell a tale of long service on the Committee on Mental Hygiene of Willard State Hospital. She's clearly a woman who would share Rose's distaste for the more frivolous aspects of life in society. By 1927, Rose is declaring a degree of independence from her mother. In December, the press reports that while Mrs. Edward DeRose is returning to 21 East 82nd Street from Southampton, her daughter is not. She will leave shortly for Cuba and then travel to California for the winter. For some time, there have been signs, troubling for her mother, that Rose is not going to deliver on her early promise as a socialite. She has indeed grown into a beautiful woman, but a very tall one, reaching the unladylike height of nearly 6 feet, and her lovely singing voice notwithstanding, her speaking voice is too deep and often too loud. Worst of all for her mother, Rose's many suitors are unceremoniously dispatched one after another by her daughter. Arguments between mother and daughter become ever more frequent until finally Rose decides to move out of the Southampton house. She doesn't go very far, moving into a small cottage at the far end of the property, which allows the two women to live as separately as possible without either of them actually having to leave. 2 years after that, Rose's mother dies, and Rose, who has been a caring, if disappointing daughter in her mother's last years, feels free to lead the life of a country woman, answering only to her own desire to live in nature with no obligations to fashion or shallow society. With no interest in returning to the three-story main house after her inheritance, Rose boards it up and fires all the servants. Thereafter, the loyal and talented Charlie Parker serves as her irreplaceable groundskeeper, chauffeur. As for the big house, for the next 35 years, it remains fully furnished, but unoccupied and used for storage. In her much smaller cottage, Rose, an inveterate collector of everything and anything, relishes the clutter. Outside, Rose gives full rein to her farming instincts, naming her agricultural enterprise 6x9's Farm. There is a well-populated barnyard, along with crops of flowers and edibles. Some lucky pigs, huh? Rose's pigs and chickens thrive in the heart of Southampton's estate section, though few are aware of them. Among those who do know of their existence are the lucky recipients of fresh eggs from Rose's chickens. Driven on her rounds by Mr. Parker, Rose delivers the eggs to certain people she favors. The late Ella King, when asked about her friend and neighbor, once recalled, quote, "If she didn't like you, she wouldn't sell you eggs." Even with a main house available for storage, Rose's habit of buying multiples of everything eventually fills her small cottage, and workmen arrive to enlarge it. For the men hired to do the work, it's a plum project. A lunch break may find them included in a sumptuous picnic with Rose as their host. Like any farmer, Rose is outdoors as long as the weather holds, tending her gardens and animals, aided by Mr. Parker. When winter arrives, she's known to share her cluttered interior with some visitors from the barnyard. It wasn't unusual, Ella King recalled, to see chickens roosting up in the ceiling beams and small piglets nestled by the fireplace. Such unconventional behavior, along with her habit of always wearing the identical baggy house dress, labeled her as an eccentric. Though really, she seems only to have been living in a way that might have seemed quite normal in a more rural part of the country. Rose, always a strong supporter of Southampton Hospital, is particularly grateful for the care she receives in her old age. Her last 2 years are spent at the Todd Nursing Home, but even then, according to her friend Ella King, she went out every day, chauffeured by Mr. Parker. When she died in 1982, the hospital inherited the bulk of her estate, and in 1985, her portrait and a plaque acknowledging her generosity were installed at the nursing home. She also left bequests to 4 churches, several libraries, and the Southampton History Museum, among others. A Riverhead liquor store owner who always got her what she wanted was the recipient of $5,000. And Robert Keene, then the town historian and a bookseller, inherited thousands of books. As he remarked at the time, he was astonished to discover that in some cases there were 8 or 10 copies of the same book. After her death, the astonishing evidence of Rose's one true eccentricity was revealed. The main house, as well as her cottage, barns, and sheds, were packed to the rafters with unused purchases. Clearly, she had never bought just one of anything she fancied. Instead, she habitually bought a half dozen or so of each item and squirreled them away in wherever she had storage. It took 8 auctions for the hospital to dispose of the building's contents, and even then there were many leftovers to be stocked and sold at the Southampton Hospital thrift shop. My next talk will focus on Consuelo Vanderbilt, whose mother was even more determinedly socially ambitious for her beautiful daughter than Rose's was, and Mrs. Vanderbilt prevailed. She forced Consuelo into a loveless marriage that began with a spectacular wedding and ended in divorce, which freed Consuelo at last. So please join me next month.
That was great. I hope everybody had a great time during this talk. If anybody has any questions, now is a perfect time to do so. If anybody is unfamiliar, at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar, there is a Q&A button and also a chat button. You can feel free to click either one and submit any questions you have that way. Let's see, first we have from a woman named Eileen. She said that she sounds like a fascinating woman. And then from
Definitely was.
Yeah. And then from Penny over at the library, she asked, did she leave a bequest to her helper/driver, Mr. Parker?
I'm sure she did. I found no reference to it, but I'm sure she did.
Let's see, from someone else, I have 2 questions. First, do you know why she named the farm 6 and 9s?
No, I wish someone could tell me. I was thinking about that. I don't know. It
is an odd name.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I thought maybe she had 9 pigs and 6 chickens or something. I don't know. I just don't know.
And their second question is, which I hope doesn't come across as insensitive, was there any indication that Rose was a lesbian?
You can draw your own conclusions. I kind of did. I think she maybe was.
Okay.
But maybe she wasn't. I don't know. She was so odd.
That's true. And it's hard to tell at this point.
Yeah.
How old was she when she died?
Let me see. She was in her 80s.
In her 80s, roughly?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. The property remains vacant. Will it remain so?
Well, that's very interesting because about, maybe 10 years ago, I spoke to a couple. Well, I spoke to the woman who was very involved in landscape pleasures at the Parish Art Museum. And she and her husband had bought the house and were thrilled with it and promoting the idea, which I think is, very likely true, that Stanford White designed it. And they were rehabilitating gardens. But then I spoke actually with Elizabeth, who I think is listening, who says it's totally abandoned now. So I need to poke around and see what's happened on the property at the corner of Hill Street and Wolsey Neck Lane.
All right. Maybe it could be a round 2 on this lecture eventually.
Right.
Yeah. So we had a lot
Maybe
more.
haunted, yeah.
So someone else is asking, was she a vegetarian?
I don't think so. I never saw her menus or got any comments on it, but I think she probably ate some of her chickens and maybe even had some bacon.
Let's see. Could you please talk a bit more about the wood carvings? Did she create a lot of work? What kinds of subjects? And does the museum own her work?
Well, that's very interesting. Our curator knows more about it, but these wood carvings, and I understand there are quite a few, were discovered in a storeroom at the hospital. And yeah, I think she got quite good. And it's, I don't know, Connor, are we setting a date for auctioning things?
Not that I know of, but so like Mary said, we did get contacted by the Southampton Hospital, who was clearing out some of their storerooms to make room for more PPE equipment, and they uncovered a bunch of old art that they had, many of which were some of the carvings by Rose DeRose. We have of some of them here now that will be part of an art auction that will be going on sometime later this summer. But I think we're keeping at least one or two of like the nicer ones. Some of them we just don't have the space for them. And that's what I was just looking around for in this office. If there was one of them in here, but I believe they're in the other room. But we do, I think, have at
We
least
are
one or two.
collaborating, right, with the hospital on all of this. Yeah,
Exactly, yeah. So
yeah.
that'll be coming down the pipeline. If you're on our mailing list or on our website fairly often, you'll see when we start talking about that. Yeah, that should be, I believe, by the end of the summer. That should be all coming together nicely.
Right.
And then let's see, more questions. Perhaps she named it sixes and nines because it's for curly question marks as opposed to straight quotes. Maybe because she was so different.
Hmm.
Maybe.
Maybe. It's a theory.
Let's see. Could you do a walkthrough of the art before it goes to auction? Yeah, all the stuff that's going to be involved with the auction will be cataloged and figured out and made available, I believe, online somewhere. So people will be able, I believe, to see everything before it goes anywhere. It'd be hard to bid on anything at the auction if you didn't know what it was. Let's see. I know I've seen a very large piece in the Hampton Bays atrium of the Southampton Hospital. Oh, of one of Rose carvings. I've heard that that's been there as well. I don't know if it's still there. I don't know if it's part of the ones that are now here. Mary nor I are the curator, so Zach is unfortunately not home, or he is home today. He's not here at the office, so I can't just grab him and pull him into this talk. But yeah, I have heard of that at the Hampton Bays atrium. Let's see. I hope that one or two of her wood carvings are kept for the public to view. Yes, we are keeping a couple of them here at the museum. They'll be on display eventually at some point, but if not, definitely in our archives. And where can I see the previous episodes? So all of our episodes of the Gilded Age series here, as well as many of our other lectures we've been giving since around March time, are all available on our YouTube page. So if you go to YouTube and you search Southampton History Museum, you will see our page, and we have many lectures given by myself, by Mary, by our other coworker, Zachary Taylor, the curator here at the Southampton History Museum, and some of our volunteers have given lectures, and there'll be more coming down the pipeline. Pretty much any lecture given by museum staff will always be put up on our YouTube page. Can't always do that when we have guest speakers come in because they don't always want their talks living on YouTube in perpetuity, but we will do our best to get as many as we can on there recorded for everyone to see. Let's see, someone else. Did she leave letters that you have seen?
Oh, I wish she had. We do have quite a lot of salvaged documents, including, for instance, that report card she got, which I believe Marcia Kenny, who was in the development office of the hospital, salvaged from a dumpster. So somebody threw away a lot of stuff, and happily we have quite a lot. And there are some letters to her mother, and nothing really revealing from or to Rose.
Okay. Someone else is asking, when was Rose born?
Yes, I was trying to think of when she was born. She was born in 1902 and she died in 1982.
Gotcha.
So she was 80.
Let's see. Someone else was asking previous versions of the talks. We have many people saying, "Great talk, Mary," from Julie Adams and from Tom Edmonds.
Well, thank you.
Let's see. Somebody else mentioning about the curly quotation marks.
Oh,
There
yeah?
what she did. Okay. And then another question. Thank you very much for doing this series. It's been very interesting. So not merely a question, just another thank you.
Well, thank you.
Well, it seems like I think we've parsed through all the questions that I have seen here in the chat. So with all of that, we want to thank everybody again for coming to this talk, for staying, for listening, for coming to all of our other talks. I want to remind everybody to go to southamptonhistory.org and you can go to our calendar page, see all of our upcoming events like the kid programs that I mentioned before, where today even I just went outside or looked at the window a minute ago and I saw we have about 15 or so kids out on the lawn right now doing arts and crafts programs while this lecture was going on. We have our thrift fair going on this weekend, and we have even more stuff coming down the pipeline. So thank you everybody for helping us out, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Have a good day, everybody.